What's your impression of what's going on down there?
Yeah, I really don't have too many details. I mean, I
Yeah.
saw some reporting come in from the Wall Street Journal that said that there were two National Guard members that had been shot,
Yeah.
and one suspect that had been shot. I now heard from a former colleague of mine who's still on the job in D.C. that it was in fact four National Guard members that were shot.
Oh my goodness.
One of whom, or at least one of the shooting victims, is deceased.
One meaning it could be the perpetrator.
It could be the perpetrator. It
Okay.
could be one of the National Guard members. I
Oh
haven't
man.
any confirmation on that.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I obviously our thoughts are with them. And so, any other sort of details about what was going on? Were they in the process of?
No, I mean, obviously, I'm sure your viewers are aware. If they're not, National Guard troops have been deployed on the streets of Washington, D.C. Now for the past 100+ days.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they've primarily been patrolling areas around federal buildings.
Hmm.
I mean, I've seen them the most on the National Mall, and then in and around, the White House, the Capitol, obviously, Union Station, and other federal landmarks. Have not seen them out patrolling any of the neighborhoods. But again, I don't have any other details with regards to the shooting other than potentially four victims.
Oh boy, that's really sad.
Yeah.
Well, so what? Well, first of all, what do I call you? Like Mike, Michael, Mr.
Yeah, Mike's
Fanone?
fine, man. I keep it casual.
All right, good. So, I know a lot about your story. One of the things that's always sort of fascinated me, and that was the first thing I wanted to ask you. Like, I do want to talk about news of the day, but um, I've always been fascinated by the fact you said that you voted for Trump at one point. Is that correct?
I did in 2016.
Yeah. So, I know that you've probably talked about this before, but it's hard to find information. Whenever you search Michael Fanone and Trump, you get a whole bunch of other shit. You don't hear much about. So what was it that attracted you to him, and then what changed your mind?
Well, first, I mean, I was a DC police officer for 19 years. Prior to that, I was with the United States Capitol Police for a year from '01 to '02. I left the police department, DC Police, in 2021. Uh, for my entire career, I would describe myself as apolitical. It
Mhm.
really wasn't until the end of Obama's second term, which, just to give you some background, I was one of those weird people that voted for Barack Obama twice and then voted for Donald Trump.
Wow,
And what I saw was um,
that
what
does surprise me.
what made me support Republican Party really just revolved around what I saw was, one party that supported law enforcement, or at least that purported to, and another party that was, many members were demonizing and vilifying law enforcement officers. And we saw that come about from, these polarizing incidents going back to 2015 with the shooting death of Michael Brown.
Right.
And, it brought about this national discussion about policing and police reform, which I supported fully. I'm the last person to ever say that law enforcement is above reproach or reform. I think reform is desperately needed to repair and rebuild the relationship between law enforcement agencies and the communities that they're charged with keeping safe. That
Right.
being said, I saw a lot of politicians using some very dangerous rhetoric, very similar to what we're seeing today, used by Republicans, towards anybody that stands in opposition to this administration, about members of the law enforcement community, seemingly painting us with a broad brush. And I saw that impact that was having on my colleagues and myself. Um, and so it pissed me off,
Right.
and it made me vote for Donald Trump. It wasn't so much that I was a fan of Donald Trump himself. Um, I guess for me, the jury was kind of out. I saw him as, I think, what a lot of his detractors saw him as, which was a trust fund baby, who was kind of cosplaying as a politician, or this great disruptor. I really didn't care about that. What I cared about was a political party that was seemingly supporting and backing the law enforcement profession.
So it was more like you were alienated. Do you remember who it was that alienated you, or what the comments were like?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember watching rallies and speeches, mostly by not national level politicians, although there were a few, but there were a lot of local level politicians that were using, rhetoric. I remember, a march in New York City that I watched televised, in which, a lot of like city council members and local politicians were chanting, something along the lines of, kill the pigs, or,
Oh, wow,
wrap them up like bacon, some shit like that. And it was,
wow.
but what was worse was, I mean, listen, nobody wants to go to jail. Uh, it's not that I'm unfamiliar with, people not enjoying being in the presence of police officers,
Right.
but for the most part, we felt as though, as a profession, that we had the support of, the community, in that they wanted to feel safe. And
Right.
they knew that law enforcement is really the backbone of, the public safety infrastructure in America.
Mhm.
And while there's certainly room for improvement on our part, that seemed to stay true the vast majority of my career. I started, I worked in narcotics. I was a plainclothes officer.
Mhm.
So I had the benefit of going out into the community and them not knowing that I was a police officer. But what I would see colleagues, uniformed officers, come into a restaurant, get spit at, uh, have people spit in their food, have people berate them while they were simply trying to sit and have a meal. I mean, I saw the change in the way that they were viewed, even when they were just, out and about and not necessarily interacting with anyone. And it just, as somebody who had seen, police officers at their best,
Right.
um, it pissed me off. And,
I can.
yeah, that's where that vote derived from.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this, but I do. First of all, there's a lot of what you said uh, I find really interesting. But just to put a pin in this, button up this Donald Trump thing. So I think a lot of people would say, you know, uh, even with that sense of alienation, how did you excuse things like, the multiple rape accusations and this comments about sexual assault and the overt racism? I mean, were you not aware of the overt racism? Did you? You know what I mean? Like he said, Mexicans are rapists, and he said, I forget what he had said up to that point, but he had a long history of pretty overt racism.
Yeah. So, what I knew about Donald Trump, I learned through Fox News,
Okay.
which was obviously like a pretty heavy filter when it came
Yeah.
to anything that we would now view as being problematic.
Okay.
I didn't know any of that shit. All I knew was that he made other politicians feel incredibly uncomfortable, and as somebody who had felt as though like my voice was not heard. I'm not speaking as like a white straight guy. I'm just speaking as a middle class, working class American looked at politicians kind of like as scumbags,
Mhm.
people that were they might have be well intentioned when they go into office, but it's not very long before they are all in it for themselves. And yeah, I felt
Okay.
this real disconnect, and a lot of that stemmed from, the time that I spent as a U.S. Capitol Police officer, and I kind of got to see, these members of Congress up close,
Huh.
and not people that I would want to socialize with or in
Okay.
any way associate myself with at all. I mean, it really was. it was kind of deflating because
Yeah.
you grow up and you kind of hold these people up on a pedestal and think of them as leaders rather than just public servants, people
Right.
that are just kind of managers holding a position. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to have that that kind of Aaron Sorkin, West Wing ish
Right.
view
Right.
perspective. But then I met Aaron Sorkin, and I learned that he wrote most of the West Wing while he was smoking crack. So
Okay.
now it all makes
Well,
sense.
I got you. So, you how old were you when you joined the Capitol Police? Were you an police officer before that too, or?
No, man, I was working for the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners. I was
Oh wow, my dad was a carpenter.
Yeah, I was a journeyman carpenter. I
Wow.
started my apprenticeship when I was 17 years old, and it was 9/11 that changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow. All right.
I was in Washington D.C. working on a
Right.
construction site on 9/11. I remember that day vividly, and it's obviously September 11th. By September 29th, I was on my way to Glencoe, Georgia, to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And I was with U.S. Capitol Police literally for 1 year to the day. I left
Okay.
September 29th, 2002.
And then you decided to go for DC Metro from that point on.
Yeah, I got hired on by them and quit on a Friday and started with MPD on a Monday.
So here's what I was thinking when you were telling me, because what you're telling, all the stuff you're telling me is not things that I knew. So your department, the DC Metro Police, I've been covering politics since 2008, and I've interacted with police. Protests are one of the things that I really sort of specialized in, and Metro has a reputation among activists, just a really good reputation for knowing how to interact with the public and not to lose their cool. And you know, I've never heard, I haven't heard a whole bunch of horror stories about the DC Metro Police. I imagine that sort of ethos extends to your entire force. That you're used to dealing with a diverse population. In other words, you seem to be one of the good forces. And
Well,
I'm wondering,
I would describe our department as progressive
yeah,
and in a lot of ways ahead of its time. But
right,
when it comes to First Amendment assemblies or protests, as you call them, don't give us too much credit.
okay,
All of those policies were born out of an incident that occurred in the early 2000s. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. You said you started covering in '08.
yeah,
A little bit before that, we had the big protests that occurred were IMF, the International Monetary Fund protests that occurred every year, and these drew tens of thousands of protesters. We had a lot of property damage that was associated with that, and we started utilizing some really aggressive tactics.
yeah,
Kettling was one of the tactics that came about during that time, which is kind of like surrounding protesters, condensing them down, and then arresting everybody. And there was
okay,
an incident that occurred in Pershing Park, which is in downtown Washington D.C. And there were a number of protesters that were there. The Metropolitan Police surrounded them, and they ended up arresting. First, they ended up, tear gassing and pepper spraying a bunch of people that were in the park. But they also ended up and then giving them no manner to escape. And
right,
so there was a lot of uh, federal precedent that was born out of that. There was a Supreme Court case that came of it, and a lot of the regulations that seem protester friendly
right.
came from this abuse of power that occurred in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
At the hands of the Metropolitan Police Department.
All right. Well, I no, I didn't know about that stuff, but I mean, I do my interactions, and I haven't really been in DC during the Trump years, but my personal interactions were yeah, I know, right? I went to one briefing at the White House, and it was like in that show Stranger Things, and the upside down, everything was all like weird and greasy, and like. But like with the interactions I've had, uh, like regulations are one thing, but abusive police officers can get around those, and I do feel like my experience with DC Metro cops was always really positive in terms of how they handled themselves. But that was, like I said, after all that. So I guess my question is, you know, because like I don't think you're on a notorious police force. Did when the reform started to happen, you started getting all these body cam videos. Did that or was that eye opening for you, or was that a revelation to you? Or
At first I was well, first of all, like a full disclosure, I never had to wear a body worn camera. Probably one of the first body worn camera videos I ever made in my career was my participation in the defense of the Capitol on January 6th. In fact, while I was responding to that, I was actually asking my partner, Jimmy Albright, for a tutorial as to how to use the damn thing because I literally had probably worn it maybe 3 or 4 times. And most of that was like in a training environment. And the reason because I was, still classified as a undercover police officer. I spent the vast majority of my time either working in undercover capacity or in surveillance. And neither of those required the use of a body worn camera because I wasn't coming in direct contact with members of the public. That being said, my viewpoints changed dramatically. Um, First, being very resistant. And I'll tell you the reasons that I was resistant. It's not this, conspiratorial, like, oh, I don't want people to see the dirty shit that we're doing. It's
Mhm.
that my concern was that people would discount the officers' um, understanding of how events were unfolding
Right,
and rely solely on the body worn camera footage, which unfortunately has become a byproduct of the introduction of those cameras. Is listen, like the officer seeing things and brings experience to the table or lack of experience. All of these different factors that go into how they're perceiving and how they are processing everything that's occurring around them. When all you're doing is looking at this one dimensional video, it can create an unnecessary distrust and an over reliance on that body worn camera footage. And we even saw like if an officer saw something that wasn't captured on the body worn camera footage, we got to a point in which the U.S. Attorney's Office would not prosecute or bring about those charges that may have been born out of that what the officer saw because it wasn't memorialized on their body worn camera. It's not to
right.
say it didn't happen. It just the angle wasn't there and it didn't capture what the officer saw. And so, that was I saw that as an issue. That being said, um, fast forward a year or two, and I started to realize that an officer who is aware of the fact that they are wearing this body worn camera can in fact use it to their advantage and that it's an excellent evidence gathering tool, especially when it comes to field interviews and talking with people out on the street. It can memorialize all of that conversation. If an officer is going into a situation, it may keep their emotions in check because
Mhm.
they know that they are being recorded. And I think that over time, you started to see, fewer incidents in which there was questionable use of force. And, there were a lot of, I think the benefits far outweighed, any of the issues that I had originally anticipated with their use.
Did it change? Did it change the way you felt about your fellow officers, though? They always, you always heard the couple of bad apples thing, and then once the cameras, not just the body cameras, but everybody's cameras, you started seeing all these incidents pop up. Did that change your feelings about that?
No, I
No.
I
Okay.
mean, like I worked with a lot of officers over the course of my career. I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that I felt as though a cop that I was working with was using force out of malice.
Okay.
Um, More often than not, What I experienced was officers that used unnecessary amounts of force based or born out of fear and a lack of adequate training. I worked in the training field for a number of years, and we used to have this saying that, you know, training breeds proficiency in your weapons and tactics, and a proficient officer is a confident officer, and confident officers use less force. And that proved true. I mean, there were statistics that back that up. The problem was, most officers don't have access to adequate training. It's just something that has not proven to be affordable by local police agencies.
All right. Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah, yeah,
That's who needs it, right?
exactly. I mean, that's why I've always been a proponent of, when it comes to using force. I mean, I don't think that the federal government should get involved in training every aspect of policing and creating this like national police force. But I do think that they should provide federal resources when it comes to training state, local, and municipal law enforcement agencies as to how they use force and the tactics they use. I don't think that should change whether you're in some rural town or you're in Washington, D.C. or New York City. The way that police departments use force on American citizens should be universal. And so the federal government should foot the bill for that training because most agencies can't. I mean, I learned in my interactions with the Metropolitan Police Department, we have what seems like an egregious budget. It's like $300 billion. But, when you actually break it down, like 90% of that budget goes to retired officers' pensions and
Yeah.
current officers' salaries.
Uh,
So what you're left with is like a very small sliver of that pie to cover all the other costs, updating technology, facility costs, vehicle maintenance, and training, which is usually the smallest sliver that's left over.
yeah, wow. All right, so let's talk a little bit about. I know that you're probably tired of telling the stories of January 6th, and um, I don't think people can hear those stories often enough, though. Um, One of the first things I thought of, because I was watching it I was covering it for my website, but from TV, and during the rally, man, people were starting to talk about how things were getting ugly. The mood was ugly. When did you guys start hearing and feeling like there was going to be a problem?
Well, I was at home.
Mhm.
So, again, like I said, I worked in a small mission unit, a narcotics and violent crime focused unit. So I had nothing to do with, what was happening that day with the Stop the Steal rally. I mean, there were officers from
Mhm.
my unit that had been retasked and were a part of these civil disturbance units, which is customary when we have a large scale
Yeah.
First Amendment assembly. We take officers from other details, other assignments, and place them, just in case. And that's what we had that day. That being said, I do remember specifically getting phone calls from my partner Jimmy, who was talking to other coworkers, colleagues of ours that were already at work.
Mhm.
And obviously, I was watching on television. Like I heard the rhetoric that was being used by a lot of the speakers that day. It was, I think, conservative description would be inflammatory.
Yeah.
I would go as far, as to say it was insightful. Um, and then when, this large group, I think the estimates are between 10 and 15,000, broke off from the main rally and started marching towards the Capitol. That's when I knew that, there was I was probably not going to be involved in my regular assignment that day.
Mhm.
And I started heading into work. That was probably around 12:30. By 1 o'clock, just before 1 o'clock, is when the initial perimeter, the lower West Terrace perimeter, was breached, and officers were being assaulted. At that point, I was in the office. I remember going over to my partner Jimmy's cubicle and he asked me what we were going to do that day, and I told him, "Go put your uniform on. We're going to the Capitol,"
Yeah.
and that's what we did.
Wow.
I put a uniform on, probably the first time I'd done so in like 10 years, and drove to the Capitol.
Um, so speaking about it now, is it still traumatic for you? Do you get like,
No,
all right, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear
so,
that. 'Cause
I have long since resolved uh, the trauma of the day. What continues to what I continue to struggle with is the aftermath.
right.
What's happened every day since and continues up into this day. Whether it's the continuation of, violent rhetoric being used by politicians for the sole purpose of inciting violence, tearing American families apart, friends apart, creating this divisive culture that has now become normal, but also denying, my experience and denying the experience of so many of my colleagues who are injured or fought like hell to try to survive the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Uh, it's just crazy what has happened since then, and the way he pardoned all those people. Um, what what do you make of? I wanted to skip around a little bit. What do you make of what's happening now with these lawmakers and that Trump is saying should be executed for what they said? You must have some strong opinions about that.
I mean, it is treason. It is treasonous. Um, what what Donald Trump is doing, it's not hyperbole. It's intentional. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows that by using that type of insightful language, rhetoric, that it will inspire his supporters to, commit acts of violence, uh, at worst, to threaten these, members of Congress and senators at best, and create a culture of fear or further this culture of fear in the United States. And that, listen, if you say anything, if you do anything in opposition to this administration, this is what you're going to experience. And I mean, I can tell you from experience, it's 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 terrifying. It's devastating. My mother had to relocate because she was receiving so many death threats, and even had people show up to her house. Um, and it's her son, somebody that loves her very much, and having and to live with knowing that it's because of things that I've said and that I've done, although righteous and truthful, standing in opposition to Donald Trump has some very serious consequences. And one of those is, having your life threatened, sometimes on a daily basis.
Yeah. So is that that's I guess still happening to you,
Oh yeah,
right? Yeah.
continues to this day.
So okay, so what you just said that what Donald Trump is doing is treasonous. So I mean that's also punishable by death. But I guess what they'll do is they'll say, well, you just said Trump's a fascist. You said Trump committed treason. You're inciting violence against him. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, those things are all true. Donald Trump is a fascist. Donald Trump is an authoritarian, or at least exhibits these authoritarian. And there's countless examples to go back. I mean, we can sit there and go through all of the egregious things that Donald Trump has done just within this first term of office. But I'll go back and say Donald Trump incited an insurrection against this country. It's a fact. It was investigated by Select Committee. They put out a very extensive report detailing exactly what he did and why he did it. And it began with him losing a free and fair election in 2020, and then beginning to spout these lies that the election was stolen, recruiting, his sycophants to travel the country and tell his followers, his supporters,
Right.
that this election had been stolen, and then inspiring those individuals by lending the credibility of his office, by lending the credibility of the 147 members of Congress that voted not to certify the election. All of them are guilty of insurrection.
Right.
All of these people with now we now know absolutely no evidence whatsoever to the contrary that this was not in fact a free and fair election. They told the American people that it was, and they conned them, manipulated them into carrying out what I experienced on January 6th at the Capitol. And Donald Trump has never deviated from that rhetoric in public ever. To this day, he says the 2020 election was stolen. He's described the people that attacked me as patriots. He has disparaged me, disparaged my colleagues, and he pardoned each and every individual that was involved in that attack, pardoned all the individuals that assaulted me, each of whom pled guilty, didn't even go to trial. They pled guilty and admitted their culpability in their crimes, were sentenced, some of them to lengthy sentences. I mean, you remember Daniel Rodriguez, the guy that drove the stun gun multiple times into my neck, causing me to suffer a heart attack and eventually a traumatic brain injury. They're all free.
Yeah.
And what that does is it sends a message, not a dog whistle, a message loud and clear.
Yeah.
If you commit crimes on my behalf, I will absolve you of all criminal culpability. The last round of pardons, the 77 individuals that were involved in the elector scheme, all of whom federally pardoned. Again, if you commit crimes on my behalf, I will absolve you of all criminal culpability.
I just want to say also, if anybody who's watching, I really hate that shit when people are like, "Oh well, isn't what you're doing the same thing?" I don't think that. I was asking Mike because I knew he'd be able to answer it. But yeah, the truth of the assertion makes a difference.
They want to get you exactly what you just said. They want you to stop saying it because they want you to stop calling out the administration.
Right.
And they use the fact that, it's always this whataboutism when it comes to, the Republican Party.
So that's what, also before I move forward, I did want to ask you, so I'm sure that you've already said this publicly, but I didn't. I assume if you have shared the information that you voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, or did you not vote? Or
I voted for Joe Biden in 2020, and I voted for Kamala Harris in 2024.
Okay, all right. So
it's going to be a really long time, if ever. It probably won't live long enough to ever support another Republican candidate.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. Although it sucks that it had to happen this way.
Yeah, I mean, again, like one of the silver linings of January 6th and that experience is that it has opened my eyes to many things. Most of those coming through conversations with people like yourself that I would have never had the benefit of having a conversation with. I tell people all the time, and I think it's, pretty common knowledge, like you only know what you know. I lived in the law enforcement echo chamber.
Right.
All of my friends were police officers. I socialized with cops. My kids socialized with cops' kids. I mean, that simply was, who I was and what I knew. And so having had the benefit now of being out of that career field and then obviously having, the opportunity to speak to so many different people from so many different walks of life.
Right.
I don't ever see myself supporting a Republican candidate, even if the Republican Party was to return to what they refer to as the golden age of Reagan. And I think all those guys were scumbags.
Oh, well, good. So we agree on that too. I'm glad to hear that. So, here's something. You were with CNN for a while. Are you allowed to talk about that? Is that okay to ask you about?
I don't know if I am or not, but it doesn't
Okay.
stop me from doing it.
All
So
right. All right. Well, so I know that you left CNN. I guess I missed the whole story around that. So what happened there? Well, first of all, how was your time at CNN, and how did it come about, and how did it end?
I mean, the first I don't know, couple of months was fantastic. It was amazing. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but um, just to give you a kind of insight, that was during the Zucker um, administration, and then Zucker obviously was out, and Chris Lick came in, and it was all downhill after that.
All right.
I mean, I think the first real point of contention was surrounded like the release of my book. Um, you know, I for people who've never written a book, never had a book published, just to give you that kind of an insight, like unless you're fucking Barack Obama, you don't make a lot of money. You
Right.
don't get a big advance. I didn't get a big advance. It was not very much money, and so a big portion of your proceeds from the book is based off of selling and whatever portion of the individual sales of the book, which is not much. I don't know, it's like literally pennies, but that was a big deal to me, and I wanted the book to be successful. Obviously, it's about my life, and so I had negotiated kind of what they call a carve out with Jeff Zucker, and he basically said, "Listen, man, take 2 weeks and do whatever the fuck you need to do to promote the book."
Right.
Like I don't, there's, we're not going to deny you the ability to because I wasn't making that much money at CNN either. I
Right.
was
Right.
barely making any more. In fact, I honestly I wasn't making more money than I made as a cop because I had to pay for my own health insurance because I was a contractor.
Oh
And
wow.
so like when you factor that into things, like I was making less money than I made as a cop. And so
Jesus.
the book release comes along, and at this point, like CNN, first of all, is not known as a place where people go to launch their books. It's just their viewership is just not the book buying viewership for whatever
Okay.
reason, and so there I was, my publisher and my book agents were booking me all these media appearances on other shows from other networks, and all of a sudden, I start getting told, like, no, you're not doing that. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And not only was I being told that I couldn't do these other networks like MSNBC and, The Daily Show and all these different opportunities that were popping up,
Yeah.
but CNN wasn't really doing anything to promote my book either.
Huh.
And so it really got ugly between me and the network, to the point where Chris Licht, I think at one point was like, well, fuck it, he could just quit.
Wow.
Which I thought was like, uh, it just showed me like how much these guys couldn't give a shit less about me, about what I was going through. Like,
Yeah.
here I am, a guy that spent 20 years at the police department, went through January 6th, was struggling with like health issues and PTSD in the aftermath of that, was grateful for this opportunity at CNN, and now was being, shelved because I didn't really fit the new direction that the network wanted to go in. And you started seeing that with like guys like, Don Lemon getting pushed out and pushed to daytime and then pushed out altogether. And then Jim Acosta and like all these other people that had kind of been, staples in the, I'm not going to say anti-Trump movement. I think that's disingenuous and it's disrespectful to them.
Yeah, I agree.
They were truth tellers
Yes.
at a time when most networks were having a real difficult time figuring out how to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And so, the relationship kind of, I ended up they gave me 3 MSNBC appearances, and it was kind of hilarious because, the book, wizards at my publisher, like they analyze every, I mean, you'll do a TV hit and they'll say,
Mhm.
during that hit, And in the aftermath of that hit, like going 2 or 3 hours, like you sold 3,972 copies of your book.
Right.
That was after doing an MSNBC appearance. After doing like Jake Tapper, they'd be like, you sold 3 copies of your book. And it was literally
Wow.
that much of a difference. And so now I'm like really getting fucking pissed off because,
Yeah.
I want this thing to be a success. I want it to be a New York Times bestseller. It ended up being a New York Times bestseller in spite of CNN's best efforts, I think, to scuttle the book and scuttle any success that I would have
So
had.
weird.
So, yeah, I mean, dude, it just, it turned into it went from being an incredible experience and opportunity to just being literally the worst job that I ever had
Yeah. Well, a bad taste.
in my life. And I was hoping to transition from, obviously the January 6th guy to a voice in, the national conversation about policing and police
Yeah.
reform in this country because I felt like I had a unique perspective.
Right.
I don't know any fucking police officers, like literally rank and file guys that have been elevated to, to be a law enforcement analyst at a, legacy news company.
Yeah.
You always get the chief of police that, retired 30 fucking years ago, probably hasn't put handcuffs on anybody, since World War II. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's the guy that we want talking about policing today. Like, you don't have a fucking clue what it's like to be a police officer today.
Right.
And so that was my hope. And they pretty much dashed that.
Hmm.
It really all ended when they did the Trump town hall with Caitlin Collins.
Yeah.
That fucking disaster of an event. And I wrote an op-ed, which I wrote many op-eds for CNN that were very well received. I wrote an op-ed and I remember it was titled CNN is holding a town hall for the guy that tried to have me killed. And
Wow.
CNN obviously refused to run it. And so I sent it to the Rolling Stone and, it was an incredibly well-received piece, but obviously didn't buy me any good grace with CNN. And they took me off the air after that. I
Wow.
think I had like maybe 4 or 5 months on my contract and that was the end.
Wow.
But, no love lost there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
No.
So, I don't know how much CNN you watch anymore, but like, how did it make you feel when? I mean, literally, like, I feel like 18 hours out of every day was spent promoting Tapper's book. Did that drive you up a wall, or were you not conscious of that?
No, I mean, people were telling me about that. I wasn't watching CNN at that point. But I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I those guys, like, they're not, Tapper's just kind of like a clown. I
Yeah.
mean, he always struck me as, he's kind of like an opportunist. He's very much, JD Vance-ish,
Hmm.
in that I just kind of felt like he goes wherever he sees, upward mobility for himself and, an opportunity. And I kind of felt like, the, left of center folks were so fucking fed up with him at that point that, he kind of felt like, oh, like now I'm being well received by the right. And I wrote this book trashing, the former president, Joe Biden. And listen, like I, I found it funny that it was that he felt that this book was somehow exposing some deep held secret, but literally everyone in America was watching Joe Biden age and his cognitive abilities were just not what they were, at the beginning of his administration. And it was obvious to everyone.
Okay.
And so, like, of course, internal team is going to try to put their best face forward when it comes to, his. But listen, I I had fucking many conversations with Joe Biden over the course of those 4 fucking years. Many conversations. In fact,
Mhm.
I would go so far as to say, like, I think I had a pretty good view as to, his abilities to do the job. Was he the same guy that I met in 20 fucking 20? No, not at all. Was he this clueless fucking Weekend at Bernie's character that, the book fucking kind of described him as? Absolutely not. That's
Alright.
bullshit. Should he have run for another term? No.
Okay. Well, that answers that. I didn't ask you. Yeah, so
Yeah,
how
I
was
just want to say one of the viewers commented that even a failing Biden was his mind failing was 1,000,000% better than Trump, and I
yeah,
would I couldn't agree with that more.
alright,
And I, like, again, I think a lot of the criticism towards Tapper is, where the fuck are you now?
okay.
You've got this president that not only is his mind failing right before our very eyes, but he is doing things and saying things that are so dangerous and damaging to, whether it's, domestic policy, Americans' relationship with fellow Americans, or our foreign policy and, and our relationship to the world. And these are things that I'm telling you, mark my words, Tommy, will not be repaired in our lifetimes. This is
Yeah, yeah,
something that's going to require our children, our children's children,
bro,
and our children's children's children
you are
to.
preaching to the fucking choir on that one,
Yeah.
man. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's nuts. So, alright, like, uh, let me just say this about Jake Tapper because, I've known him for a long time, and, I interviewed Hunter Biden not too long ago, and Hunter Biden had a lot of things to say about him. Um, I forgot what I was gonna say.
It happens to
I
me
don't
all the
know.
time on here.
Yeah. Well, you called him a fucking clown, and I mean, I think that he is a guy who really wants to be respected and has done a lot of work to build, uh, to build credibility, and I don't know. I just I think you know what, whatever. I
I
tried.
mean, listen, dude, like, it's a difficult time to be, I
Oh, you know what? I remember what I was gonna say now. All right, good. Uh, because all right, here, this was I have thought a lot of it because I interviewed Hunter, and I don't think that Mr. Tapper was particularly happy about the things that Hunter had to say, and um, I thought, because I watched CNN a lot because of my job, and he still calls Trump out. He calls Trump out a lot. I've written a couple of things recently about some really harsh call outs that he has done. And I sort of understand the like, where the fuck are you now question because, the comment that I get over and over whenever I talk about Jake Tapper is, I can't wait to read his fucking book about Trump. I mean, who knows? Maybe he will write one about Trump. Um, I don't know. I mean, so like, what's the guy supposed to do? Like he calls, he does call, yeah. I mean, he does. I mean, my feeling is, and
I mean,
what he could do is
the
right.
argument that I
Yes.
have with Tapper is that, his whole programming and CNN's programming, I don't know if it's, him personally, or I mean, I see this on all of the shows, is there is a desire to platform people who are just never going to be honest.
Right.
And I think that
So,
at the beginning, it's
for
sort of
example,
what's that?
for example,
I mean, having people like pretty much any MAGA Republican lawmaker on your program, and I get it. Like, I think the initial motivation was to try to expose those people. Um, and give a contrast. But it has devolved into something that I mean, I would venture to say is evidenced by their low ratings that the American people just don't have time for. Like they want truth tellers. Uh, I think that the audience that they traditionally had catered to in the past is not interested in hearing from Byron Donalds or Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of
Right.
these other MAGA folks. I mean, like, listen, I know that there are Republicans out there that are not MAGA and that, came to Congress and are dismayed by the current state of affairs, but also they are, cowardly in that they're not willing to sacrifice their political careers and go and call out, everything that is happening in this country.
Yeah.
But, that's I think a big part of the criticism, at least, my criticism is the fact that, and they shy away from issues like January 6th that they view to be, hyper partisan. And then, some of their shows have just become like total garbage. Like I actually like, Abby Phillips
Right.
as a human being. But I think her show is just complete and total trash.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
I
expand on it. What do you?
I mean, I just don't. It doesn't do anything other than, it's kind of like it's like when Jon Stewart criticized Crossfire. I don't know if you
Right.
remember that back in the day.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Who could forget that?
Nobody would have ever. I mean, listen, like at the time, I even watched Crossfire and thought like it was entertaining, and Tucker Carlson was like this, kind of funny bow tie guy, and then look what he fucking has, devolved
Yeah.
into. But then you had Paul Begala, and it was just this, I don't know, like, but then it got ugly,
Yeah.
and now it's really ugly, and it's just I don't think it's healthy for the country. It's not this, um,
See,
you have
I had
people
this.
that are debating and they're not debating from a place of honesty. They're not debating from, you know, they're not operating off the same set of facts. And to me, it just seems as though it's like, it's the same reason I tell people all the time, like, I don't have any interest in debating MAGA. I'm not going
Right.
to sit here and debate with you about, whether it's inhumane or unconstitutional to go in and rip people away from their families and deport them with no due process. Like, that's not a debate for me. It's not a debate for me to tell you about my experience on January 6th. I couldn't care less about convincing you. The
Right.
only thing that I want to do is defeat you. I want to remove you and your
Well,
extremist ideology from our political discourse in this country because I find it to be unhealthy.
so I've had that conversation with a few people also. So let me say, I'll ask you this. Because I watch the Abby Phillips. Well, I watch clips. Let's just say I prefer to read through the transcripts myself. But so there is. I feel like isn't there some utility? Basically, that show is Scott Jennings getting his ass kicked up and down the block every night. Is there no utility to that? Do you think to expose the? I mean, she'll just flat out say, you're wrong. I mean, she won't call. She called him. She said he lied on Twitter. She won't say. She won't call him a liar to his face that I've seen. But she'll,
Right.
What? Go ahead.
But that's the problem. If she was to go on that show and say, what you're saying right now, Scott Jennings or whatever, is a lie.
Yeah.
Like, you're lying. But she does it on in other venues. And the other thing she's doing is she's elevated Scott Jennings' platform to a position now where he has this, tremendous podcast and he's become a darling of the right. Like, the people like that do not deserve a platform. Scott Jennings does not deserve a platform. Like, he's, it's easy for people like us, that have been in this space and that understand these issues the way that we do, and are tuned in and tapped in an unhealthy degree.
Yeah.
To understand that this is an opportunist. This is a person who, in the not so distant past had some relatively moderate views, on different things, and now almost on a daily basis contradicts Scott Jennings of 4 or 5 years ago, but does it full throated, and with the sole purpose of gaining this status and elevated platform that, at this point in the country, whatever he does and says, and however, we may perceive him to be discredited on Abby Phillips' show, he's building, you know, for every person that thinks he's an asshole and a clown, there's, 200 people on the right that are starting to see him and listening to the things that he says simply because they see him as the guy that that goes on the show and owns the libs day in and day out. And I just don't think it's healthy for the country. I think that if journalism wants to return to um, you know the Walter Cronkite days, which I think is probably a little I don't know, idealistic,
Yeah.
but get back to platforming people that tell the truth. I don't think that it's unfair to simply not allow a person to lie to your face unchecked. And I don't think that it's necessarily like people say things about Don Lemon and Jim Acosta that they're too opinionated but I mean, if you watch their shows, especially on these platforms, and a lot of people in the independent media space, to me, the only thing that they're doing is they're assembling facts and giving you a perspective based on, assembling those facts. And it's something that's relatable to a lot of us, which is why I think people are flocking to the independent news space and, leaving legacy media behind. Plus, they see, these, billionaires and trillionaires that are getting involved in, ownership of all of these like multimedia conglomerates,
Right.
and no one can trust that that they're getting an accurate accounting of things, or at least not a watered down version of the truth.
So let me just clarify what you're saying, because in a lot of people we hear you say Scott Jennings doesn't deserve a platform, and will say to themselves, "Well, that sounds like an anti-free speech kind of attitude." But it sounds to me like you're saying that the key difference is the lying, telling the truth versus lying. Is that fair to say, or if there was an honest conservative, would that be okay with you?
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with conservative values. I don't have problems with people. I think that, one of the things that, like, I want a strong, healthy Republican Party to contrast a strong and healthy Democratic Party. But right now, we don't have that in this country.
Yeah, we're gonna have it
And
either.
I don't, and it, yeah, I mean, it's not Scott Jennings' perspectives on abortion or Scott Jennings' perspectives on the economy and how to fix the economy that trouble me with Scott Jennings. It's Scott Jennings' conspiratorial viewpoints towards January 6th, or the rhetoric that he espouses, directed, saying things like that leftists are the ones who are the vast majority of individuals committing violent acts in this country. First of all, and doing that in lieu of saying we should denounce all political violence.
Right.
Or if he does it in the most disingenuous fact, like the same way that Donald Trump does. Well, I denounce political violence, but radical leftists need to hang the nearest tree.
Yeah. Right.
Like, come on, dude. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not, that's my argument against platforming people like that. I think there should be a diversity of perspectives. And as long as people are willing to engage in conversation, honestly, and dealing with facts, not alternate facts, just
Right.
facts.
There's an oldie but a goodie, right? So, you've been incredibly generous with your time. So let me not try and go on too much longer. But um, I do want to ask you, um, when it comes to Trump 2.0, um, where do you see this going? Because right now you've got, um, the situation with these Democrats, and he's saying that that they whatever they should be they're guilty of death penalty crimes. You know, and this the Epstein files, and what it's there's another 3 years left. What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I think that, when it, unfortunately, I think things are going to get a whole hell of a lot worse before they get any better. Um, I think that, my experience as a law enforcement officer, uh, people are they're most dangerous when they're cornered and they have nothing left to lose. And I kind of see Donald Trump as, this is a person who's, you know, up there in years, who is cornered, um, and the the likelihood, if there are free and fair elections in 2026, of Donald Trump not being impeached, or at least investigated and having his administration investigated into oblivion, are slim to none. And so I think he's starting to feel the pressure, and I think you're starting to see him lash out in ways that are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that that's only going to it's only going to get worse from here. I'm of the belief that Donald Trump ran for president for two reasons. One of them was he he wanted to enrich himself, and we've seen that now
right.
with his purported wealth from these crypto schemes, in that he's now worth in somewhere in excess of $800 billion,
Yeah,
which is insane. Absolutely insane. And I think that that was his real motivation. Obviously, staying out of prison was a huge motivation. But I think that the other part to that, the darker part, was that when he talked about the retribution tour, he sold it to his supporters as his retribution against, his political opponents, anyone that stood in opposition to his administration. But I really think that, in kind of the same vein as the way he went about pardoning people, like, oh, I'll just pardon everybody. Like, I don't want to hear it case by case. Just pardon everybody. His war on America is just. I want to, go scorched earth against all Americans for not reelecting me in 2020. And this is his retribution tour against America. And you see that in all the, Trump supporters who are now being adversely impacted by his administration's policies.
right.
Whether it's through, immigration, whether it's, farmers who are being impacted, tariffs, taxes. You have, shit, what the hell was I just about to say? I mean, there's just this laundry list of things
Yeah,
that, AC, ACA subsidies,
yeah,
the people losing access to Medicare and Medicaid, rural medical facilities losing all of their government funding and having to shut down. All of these things really target MAGA. The core base supporters for Donald Trump. So he doesn't give a shit who he destroys, as long as he stays out of jail, he gets his retribution, and he makes billions of dollars off of crypto. And I foresee he'll be hopping on that Qatari jet to Saudi Arabia and living out the remainder of his days,
yeah.
in some guest house of you know, um, the Saudi prince.
So you think he's going to flee their jurisdiction? Is that what you're? So, Rich, so do you think that Trump could end up in jail? I mean, he's got this immunity.
I mean, listen, like, he does, um, It would be a daunting task, but I mean, technically, the Supreme Court said that he had immunity from official acts. I think
Right.
there's a whole host of things that you could say were not official acts that Donald Trump committed, to include, I believe, inciting an insurrection, and going about and really defrauding the American people by, selling them on these lies that just were unsupported by any facts or reality.
So you think that to sort of translate that some future attorney general could refile the January 6th case and just sort of argue a point at a time which things were official and which things weren't?
I mean, that's essentially what Jack Smith did with his indictment. I
Yeah.
mean, when the Supreme Court ruled that
Mhm.
Donald Trump had immunity, Jack Smith eliminated several of the counts that he thought could even be loosely construed as official acts, for the simple purpose of avoiding, bringing about the strongest case, which
Right.
is the responsibility of all, U.S. attorneys and prosecutors, and but also bringing about a case that's has a high likelihood of actually winning. And so
Mhm.
he left it open. I would hope that somebody would pick up be the standard bearer for that effort, despite, I don't care if the motherfucker's on his deathbed.
Yeah.
I would like to see justice done as somebody who was, had their life turned upside down by his actions, leading up to January 6th. Also, I,
Well,
I think that, the American people, in order to heal this nation, need accountability. They
right.
need these things to come to light. We need to see a trial. We need to see trials involving all of these individuals and what they did. And then we need a strong legislature that's willing to address, the shortcomings of our Constitution and of our legal system to prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Yeah. Wow. That's a mouthful. All right. So look, I do want to. I want to try and wrap up on.
While we're on the subject of making wishes, I would
Yeah.
also like $1 million,
All right.
a boat, and a house in a very warm place in this country.
You didn't make $1 million at CNN. I'm shocked. So, all right. I want to try and wrap up on a happier note, and I really want to thank you
Yeah.
for this. So, I don't know that much about you personally. So, tell me about what's your family situation? You got kids, and are you married? What are you living your best life? How's all that going? How is all
I
that
mean,
going?
like, everything is subjective. I have good days and I have bad days. Some days I feel like I'm living my best life, and other days I feel like I'm in a living hell.
Yeah.
But again, and I talk a lot about silver linings post January 6th. As a law enforcement officer, you spend a lot of time away from your family.
Mhm.
And I have become incredibly close with my ex-wife, and I'm divorced. I have 4 daughters. They're 10, 12, 14, and 22. And yeah, I mean, I get to see them every single day. I'm very close with them, and I don't socialize a lot. I'm not a man about town, so to speak, but
Mhm.
I'm incredibly close to my family, and I'm grateful for that. Um, so yeah,
Well,
I'm
being a
I'm
girl
a
dad, man, there's nothing
I'm a
like it.
girl dad. I'm a girl dad and a soccer mom on the weekends and
Yeah.
most weeknights. Yeah, that's my life, man. It's pretty mundane, but
Well, no, man. God bless. My youngest, my daughter is my youngest of 4, and my other 3 kids are boys, and there's just something, you don't have favorites, but there's something that's just so different about that relationship.
yeah,
God bless. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Mike. I'm gonna let you go now. I want to thank you very much, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I hope.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Let me know.
All right.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
How the fuck do I turn this off? There's a little. There we go.